The conference room door swung open so hard my coffee sloshed onto the contract I was holding like it was some kind of winning card. "So," Shanice walked in and tossed her bag on the chair across from me, "are we sabotaging each other officially now, or are we keeping it unofficial?" I wiped the coffee off the paper with the back of my hand and didn't look up right away. 2 years I'd been perfecting this move. Don't look first, let her wait. "Depends on the budget," I said. "Official sabotage costs more. Paperwork involved." "Oh, look at you got jokes. I figured they'd swapped your sense of humor out for a sales quota a while back." That's when I finally looked up. She was standing there, arms crossed in a gray blazer that definitely cost more than my monthly rent in Midtown. Hair pulled back in a low ponytail, not a strand out of place, same as it was 2 years ago at that miserable holiday party where she walked off with the Manager of the Quarter award right from under my nose. "Sit down, Shanice. We've got numbers to deal with, not a rematch. Who says it's not the same thing?" She sat, pulled out her laptop, set it down with this precision like she was measuring the angle with a ruler. I knew that habit. She always does that right before she tears somebody's presentation to shreds. Watched her do it twice. Thank God, neither time on me. "All right," I started, fanning my papers out across the table. "Steve wants us to put together a joint strategy for Madison Retail by Friday. We've got 4 days." "Does Steve even understand what he's doing?" Shanice leaned forward, elbows on the table. "He's putting 2 people who spent 2 years fighting over the same territory in one room and telling them to work it out. That's like throwing 2 cats in a box and hoping for friendship." "Maybe he thinks we're adults. Maybe he thinks branch mergers just sort themselves out." I couldn't hold back a smile. She caught it, narrowed her eyes like she'd spotted a weak point in my defense. "You just smiled, Dominic. Put that on the record." I coughed. "You smiled." I grabbed a pen and started doodling in my notepad so I wouldn't have to look at her too long. Old habit from negotiations. When you don't know what to say, draw arrows. "Look, we can keep playing this game for 4 more days, or we can actually do the work. Madison Retail is $2 million a year if this closes right. I'd rather get a bonus out of it than a medal for longest-running feud in company history." "You think this is a game?" She uncrossed her arms, not as combative now. "For 2 years, I genuinely thought you were stealing my clients out of Buckhead. Every time I closed a deal, a week later your signature would show up on some suspiciously similar contract nearby." "Wait, stop." I set the pen down. "I was thinking the exact same thing about you. You took Peachtree Industries literally 2 days before I had a meeting with them." She froze. "What meeting are you talking about?" "March 15th, 2 years ago. I spent a month putting that presentation together." "March 15th." She repeated the date slowly, staring somewhere past me like she was trying to pull up a file in her memory. "That's when Karen from Territory Management forwarded me a list of open accounts." "Open?" "That's what it said in the email. These accounts are not assigned to any manager." Something ugly shifted in my chest. Not hurt anymore, worse than that. The suspicion that the whole picture I'd been painting for 2 years had been crooked the entire time. "Show me that email," I said. "It's on my old branch email account. I don't have access anymore since the merger." "Can we ask Karen?" "Karen quit 8 months ago, remember?" Right, there'd been some going-away party, a cake shaped like a calculator, corporate humor at its finest. Shanice leaned back in her chair and dragged a hand down her face, like the conversation had already worn her out, even though we'd only been talking 10 minutes. "So," she said slowly, "we spent 2 years hating each other over a mailing list put together by someone who got fired because she didn't understand how territory assignments even work?" "Looks like it." "That's the dumbest thing I've heard all quarter." And I just listened to Trevor from marketing explain why clients need a QR code on their business cards. I laughed, and this time I didn't try to hide it. She smiled too, for real this time, without that sharp edge in her eyes that was always there whenever she looked at me across a conference table. "All right," I said. "Here's the deal. For the next 4 days, we forget about 2 years of stupid. We work as a team, we put together this presentation for the board, and if you come up with something better than what I've got, I'll say so out loud, right in front of Steve. And if your idea beats mine, then I grit my teeth and say it out loud too. Adults, remember?" She reached her hand across the table. "Deal, Dominic Tate. Just so you know, I don't lose negotiation rounds, not even with people I'm partnered up with now." I shook her hand, dry, firm grip, nothing like the quiet resentment I'd been picturing for 2 years. And right at that moment, the conference room door opened again, no knock this time, and Amanda from HR was standing in the doorway with the kind of expression that meant whatever she was about to say, neither of us was going to like it. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but I need to tell you both something about Madison Retail. It's not great news." Amanda closed the door behind her so quietly it was like she was afraid to wake something up that was better left sleeping. "How not great?" I asked. "Madison Retail is moving up the decision on the contract. Friday's off. They want it tomorrow." She set a folder down on the table. "Somebody on their side decided there was no point dragging it out. They want the final presentation tomorrow at 10 a.m. Shanice glanced at the clock on the wall, then at me. "We had 4 days. Now we've got 18 hours. 17 if you're counting sleep as something you'll actually do," Amanda added, and there was something almost sympathetic in her voice. "Steve wants a draft by 8 tonight. Good luck." She left as quietly as she'd come in, and we were left staring at each other across a table covered in papers that suddenly looked a lot less finished than they had a minute ago. "Okay." Shanice was first to break the silence, opening her laptop. "Plan A's dead. What have we got?" "I've got the financial model and 3 discount scenarios." I pulled the stack of papers toward me. "But the presentation's raw, like Trevor's steak at that cookout last summer." "I saw that steak. That wasn't meat. That was a tragedy." "Well, my presentation's at about that level of done." She turned her laptop around to face me. "I've got something else. Behavioral analysis on them going back 3 years. When they buy, how much, why they walk from vendors. I put this together a month ago, before the merger. Figured I'd use it against you if it ever came to that, honestly. Good to know I was inspiring some analytical rigor over there. You inspired a lot of things, Dominic, trust me." She said it with such a flat tone I couldn't immediately tell if it was a jab or something else. Decided not to dig into it. No time for that. "All right." I pulled my chair closer to her screen. "Show me the numbers." The next 3 hours we spent merging 2 completely different approaches to the same client. She thought in patterns, saw where the client behaved predictably and built a strategy around that. I thought in risks, where things could go wrong and how to cover for it ahead of time. Turned out, together it worked better than either of us alone, though admitting that out loud cost each of us a little something. "Wait," she said around 6, rubbing her temple. "The discount slide. You're opening at 15%. "Yeah, that's the standard opening position." "It's a weak opening position. Madison Retail negotiates down to the wire every time. I've watched them do it with 3 of their other vendors. Start at 8. 8? They'll walk and find another vendor." "No, they won't. Because you've got a volume bonus clause 2 slides later that covers the gap. Just move it earlier in the deck instead of burying it at the end where nobody's paying attention because they're thinking about lunch." I looked at the slides, then at her, then back at the slides. "That's actually smart. Say it louder. I want to hear how it sounds coming out of your mouth." "That's smart, Shanice." "Thank you. I'll frame that." She said it with a small smile, eyes still on her screen, and I noticed she chewed on the end of her pen while she thought, same as I did, something I would have called annoying 2 years ago. Now it just looked human. By 8, we sent the draft to Steve and stepped out of the conference room into an empty office, everyone else long gone, just the cleaning crew pushing carts around and the AC humming somewhere overhead. "You hungry?" she asked, packing up her things. "There's a place around the corner, decent burgers. I go there sometimes after late shifts." "You're asking me to get burgers after 2 years of barely talking to each other outside of conference tables?" "I'm asking you to eat something because you went pale about an hour ago, and I'm worried you're going to faceplant into your keyboard. That'd be a real pain to explain in an incident report." The restaurant turned out to be a small spot with wooden tables and a chalkboard menu. We sat in a corner, and for the first time all day, there wasn't a folder of documents lying between us. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said, once the drinks arrived. "Go for it." "Why'd you fight me so hard this whole time? I mean, I get where the client list thing came from now, but you could have just come and figured it out earlier. Instead, you spent 2 years going quiet every time we were in the same meeting." I turned my glass around in my hands, thinking through the answer honestly instead of the way I usually answered things at the negotiating table. "Because you were the only person at that company who made me actually prepare harder than usual. Every presentation where I knew you'd be in the room too, I reworked it 3 times. She looked at me a beat longer than usual, and right then her phone lit up on the table with a bright notification. She flipped it over, and the smile dropped off her face immediately. "It's Steve," she said quietly. "He says the board doesn't want to meet tomorrow morning. They want to meet now, in an hour, in person." An hour? I nearly dropped my fork. They're seriously trying to sit through a raw draft at 9 at night? "Steve says someone on the board's flying to Chicago tomorrow morning and wants this closed tonight." Shanice was already on her feet, buttoning her blazer. "Either we go now or Madison Retail ends up with a different branch." We left our half-eaten burgers on the table, cash tucked under a glass, and ran. Literally ran, like a couple of teenagers about to miss the last bus, except in business clothes and heels that were not built for running. Only one wing of the building was lit up, the 12th floor conference room. 4 board members were already seated at the table, along with Steve, who looked like he'd had one too many coffees in the last hour. "Tate, Johnson," Steve nodded toward the 2 empty seats, "you've got 15 minutes. Mr. Walsh flies out at 6 a.m. The man in the gray suit, Walsh, clearly, didn't even look up from his phone. Shanice hooked up her laptop, and I felt my stomach tighten. The same feeling I used to get 2 years ago before every presentation where she was also on the slate, except this time we were sitting on the same side of the table. She started talking, and for the first few minutes everything went according to plan. Numbers, charts, client behavior analysis. Walsh finally looked up. When we got to the discount slide, I took over. "Here we're proposing an opening position of 8% instead of 15%. I looked straight at Walsh, not at my notes. "That call belongs to Miss Johnson, and I'll be honest, I didn't agree with it at first. My original strategy was more conservative, but she analyzed the behavior of 3 of Madison Retail's other vendors and showed that a more aggressive opening, paired with a volume bonus, would land better. She was right, and I want that on the record as hers, not something I'm trying to take credit for as a joint idea." The room went quiet for a second. Steve blinked like he'd misheard. Walsh finally set his phone down. "Don't see managers admit that out loud very often," he said. "Keep going." We finished the presentation in another 10 minutes, and when the last slide faded out, Walsh just nodded once and said, "Draft up the contract. Good work, both of you." The board filed out, and the room was left with just me, Shanice, and Steve, who still looked like he wasn't fully convinced of what he'd just witnessed. "What was that?" he asked, staring at me. 2 years you couldn't sit in a room with her without it turning into a standoff, and now you're handing her all the credit in front of the board? "Credit goes to whoever earned it, Steve," I said, gathering up my papers. He shook his head and walked out, muttering something about 20 years in sales not preparing a man for stuff like this. Shanice and I were left alone in the empty conference room. The city lit up the windows outside, and somewhere far off a siren wailed, just the regular background noise of a big city at night. "You didn't have to do that," she said, packing her laptop slower than she needed to. "You could have just said team effort. Nobody would have dug any deeper." "I know I didn't have to. So why'd you?" I walked over and leaned against the edge of the table next to her. "Because for 2 years I looked at you across that table and thought you were taking something that belonged to me. Tonight I figured out I was just jealous of how you work. Easier to hate you than admit that." She was quiet for a few seconds, looking at me in a way she hadn't all day. No sharp edge in her eyes, no readiness to fire back. "You know what the worst part is?" she finally said. "I thought the exact same thing about you, except I called it competition, because that was easier to tell myself than admitting I couldn't stop thinking about some guy from the other branch." Thinking about me or about my quarterly numbers? Depended on the week, honestly. I laughed, and she did too, and in that empty room on the 12th floor, surrounded by dark monitors and cold coffee cups, something between us finally settled into place. Not a truce, but something simpler and heavier at the same time. 3 months later, we still shared the same office, and there was already a plaque on the door that read Tate & Johnson Combined Sales Division, though neither of us remembered who'd actually ordered it. A junior manager named Kyle, new hire, who'd heard the legends about our old war from the senior staff, wandered into our office one day with a sly grin. "Hey, so is it true you two used to hate each other? I heard you sabotaged each other's deals on purpose." Shanice looked at me, I looked at her, we grabbed our phones at the same time and typed one message together, taking turns on the same keyboard. "Hated each other so much we're getting married in June. Check your sources before you spread gossip next time." Kyle froze in the doorway, eyes going back and forth between the screen and the two of us, and we went right back to work like nothing had happened, except this time her hand was resting on my shoulder, and neither of us was in any hurry to move it.